I'd like to introduce Alison from England, who takes LDN for fibromyalgia and ME. Welcome, Alison.
Hello.
Could you tell us when you were diagnosed?
Yes, I was diagnosed in the January of 2011.
Okay. And what were your symptoms like at that time?
Very, very bad. So bad, I actually contemplated suicide. Very, very bad. The pain was just so widespread, and it was the frustration of being passed from pillar to post and no doctor being able to, said there was anything wrong with me, but yet I felt so poorly.
Oh dear. So was it just pain, or did you have, chronic fatigue?
I didn't have chronic fatigue at the time. It was just pain that had spread and spread, but the pain was so intense. I remember one night just hanging off the edge of the bed, and my daughter walked in and said, "Mum, what are you doing hanging off the bed? You look like a bat." I was just trying to get the pain out of my body. I felt that if I could dangle myself upside down, I just couldn't sleep with the pain. It was just 24 hours.
Oh, whereabouts did you have the pain?
Mainly at the time, even though it's still the same, it's not as intense now, mainly in my neck and my shoulders, though it was all down my spine, but it was mainly my head, my neck and my shoulders, which was so intense. The pain was very, very intense in those areas.
Okay, so when you were diagnosed, how old were you?
Well, I'm 36 now, so it was about 18 months ago. It was, well, I'd have been 35, wouldn't I? It would have been the January last year, so yeah, 45. I'm knocking 10 years off me.
Well, I won't tell if you don't. So when you were diagnosed, what did your doctor offer you?
Well, I actually diagnosed myself, and then I was under the pain clinic, and at the end of the consultation, I just burst into tears because they were just offering me steroid injections, etc. And I just burst into tears because it was when I was at my all-time low, and I said, I just can't go on like this. And I said to him, I've seen something on the internet which I think I may have. And he actually said, the consultant said fibromyalgia. I said yes. So I was glad that he had actually confirmed that rather than me telling him first. Yeah. And then then what happened was he totally agreed. He said, I actually do agree. And from them prescribing me one type of medication, he suddenly changed and prescribed me duloxetine, and I think it was pregabalin at the time. But I have taken many, many different medications, and nothing seems to have done anything for me whatsoever. If anything, they've probably made matters worse.
Okay, so at that time, on a score of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, what would you say your quality of life was?
Oh, if 10 was the best, I mean, it's really got to be almost a 0, because I was just ready. I just didn't want to be here anymore.
That's sad, isn't it? So
yeah.
How did you hear about LDN?
Well, it's funny because I had such a bad time, and I was actually under a counsellor a therapist for some CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, to ease my anxiety. And it was actually a gentleman there, the therapist, that knew all about fibromyalgia because he had a pain issue, and he was an ex-nurse, and he told me about LDN, so I researched it. And then in one of the local newspapers, there was another lady called Alison, actually, who was on LDN. So I tried to get hold of it, but couldn't. Nobody wanted to know. My doctor didn't want to know. In the end, I emailed the newspaper and managed to get hold of this lady's details, and she called me and she told me how to get hold of it. And I managed to go onto the internet and find a website called Prescribe for Me, and I did it that way.
Mm-hmm. So when you first started, did you have any initial side effects?
Well, I actually started it in the November last year, and I started on a very, very minor dose of just 0.5 ml. And within about 2 days, I could feel that the neck pain had eased, It didn't take the illness away, but it did ease it. And each week I was increasing my dose by another 0.5 ml. And I ended up by the 4th week, I was quite poorly. I just felt really sick, and I felt quite depressed. I just felt really sick all the time, even though I knew it had eased me pain. It had only eased it a little bit. So I came off it and decided to try again in January and get Christmas out of the way, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
I realised that 3 weeks off it, my pain did come back, you know, as bad as ever. And in the beginning of January, I went back on it, and I went straight on 1 ml. And rapidly increased it up to eventually like 4.5 mils. But the problem was, I would say for the first 7 weeks, I was getting some benefit from it, but then it just seemed to stop working for quite a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to continue with that?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay. I am actually in a group on Facebook, and I totally rely on them because you can't really go to your doctor and discuss it with your doctor. You've nobody to help you with this one. The chemist that I get it from has been very good. I've emailed them, and they've been very good with their advice. And I've been given lots of different advice by people, and it is that you do need to find the correct dosage, increase it, decrease it, take it at different times. And I seem to have tried everything, but I felt that the pain had come back and it just wasn't going away again. And this went on, well, sort of January, February was all right, March, April, and in fact it's only up until this last week that I've actually, that my chemist advised me to double my dose for a couple of weeks and see what happens. So at one point I was actually on 9 mils a day. No, there was still no change. And then I was actually ready to come off it, but I went back on the group and got such words of encouragement. I don't want to come off it because it's the only thing that has worked for me, even if it seemed to have stopped working for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It is the only thing that has made any difference to my life, so I don't want to come off it yet. But I was a bit fed up a few weeks ago, and I went back on the group, and some people said with them it took 6 months or 9 months for it to start working.
Mm-hmm.
And also that if you get stress, if you find you're stressing, that stress and LDN do not seem to mix, and it seems to, a lot of stress seems to cancel out the LDN. And also I emailed the chemist where I get it from, and they told me to take 2 supplements with it, and they were very good, and they sent me a tub of each of the supplements free. And from about 5 days ago, I lowered my LDN to 2.5 mils, and I've been taking these supplements, and I have been so much better. I don't know if that's what it is, but I really have been so much better, and I'm just keeping my fingers crossed it will continue.
Oh, that's really good. Well, I do too. I mean, there are some people who have told me that it has taken between 15 and 18 months for LDN to work for them. Don't know why it takes so long in some cases. And other people like yourself notice benefits straight away.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but it is a case of finding out what dose suits you best.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think they have to get to 4.5, but 4.5 is too high for a lot of people.
It's very funny because when I started on a lower dose and I thought it was working, you're eager to increase your dose because you seem to think that if I start taking more, it will do a better job.
Yes.
And I mean, I am hoping that this is, because fibromyalgia is a very confusing, complicated illness, and you never seem to be able to put your finger on what causes it and what causes a flare-up. But like I say, you know, being on the 2.5 mils, and certainly with these, one of them is omega-3, and I do take other supplements as well. I've very carefully chosen them, but the chemist did recommend that these particular 2 seem to work very well with LDN, and one of them is omega-3, and the other one is, it's called Advanced resveratrol formula. It's all Res V 1200, and they do seem to have made the difference as well, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm going to continue.
Good. Well, maybe we can do a follow-up later.
Yes, it would be interesting, wouldn't it?
It would. It would.
It definitely would, because I don't want to give up. It's quite funny because the ME consultant I am under, the copy of the letter that I got, which was sent to my doctor, it really put me on a bit of a downer, because he mentioned that I was taking low-dose Naltrexone, and he said, Ms. Makin, I think she's already come to the conclusion that it's not doing anything for her. And when I actually read that, I was quite upset, because I thought, but it did for 2 months, and it stopped for another 2 months, but it did do something for me. And why it stopped working, I don't know. But like I said, playing around with the dose, etc. And, you know, like you say, it would be interesting, because it's only been this last week that I have had a huge improvement. But it seems strange that I have lowered my dose and I have took the 2 supplements with it, that this has happened at this time. And I don't want to go back on all that medication again. I really don't. I have a friend who, well, she was in my year at school, and I found out that she has fibromyalgia, and she's had it longer than me. She's been very, very poorly with it. She accepts the illness because she's had it quite a long time, but she is on a lot of different drugs, and she is actually trying to wean herself off because she's on tramadol. She's trying to wean herself off drugs, and then she can try LDN. But when she's trying to come off the drugs, she gets so much pain. She's in agony, so she can't come off them. But she really wants to try LDN. You know, so I would certainly go down the route of LDN rather than the route of going on all the drugs that the GPs seem to offer you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Alison.
You're welcome.